I was convincing him to open our relationship, but he got mad and did this with our wedding rings.
While I was getting my psychology degree, I studied different theories about sexual behavior and how we could explain its diverse manifestations, especially the ones which aren't considered socially appropriate. What we consider as a standard romantic and/or sexual relationship is quite different from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and so on. An example of that dynamic is how in the 1920s, and even a few decades later, we wouldn't even consider romance and sex as separate things, because it was expected of you in most parts of the world to only develop your sexual interests after you got married and only to that person. The only type of sexual encounters outside of the marriage sphere was with sex workers, affairs, illegitimate relationships, and sometimes all of them at the same time. Today, you can easily have only a sexual relationship with a person without being marginalized by society or considered a degenerate. Some would say that is now the pattern of dating, also known as the hookup culture, motivated by dating apps where you can easily find a sexual partner, but can also be, ironically, a little difficult to find a romantic one there. All of this information dumping seems random on a Reddit post, but you'll soon understand why this topic has returned to my attention and thoughts. Either way, my point is how much romantic and sexual dynamics change over the decades. Things which were once considered transgressive are now even normal to talk about in a work environment. For example, would you stop interacting with a coworker who mentioned being on Tinder during a regular Monday conversation? I'd say you probably wouldn't, because in our time, looking for casual partners isn't a different or rare behavior. 20 years from now, what kind of sexual or romantic behavior will be normalized into our society? Could it be something considered absurd in our present? I recently went through a rough discussion about these topics with my husband. I suggested something he didn't react well to, and it created a weird atmosphere in our relationship. I decided to bring my situation to Reddit as a kind of survey. Generally, people have extremely diverging opinions about subjects such as this, and I wanted to get different perspectives of my situation. My name is Amber. I'm a 27-year-old psychologist, and I'm married to Mark. He's 29 and works with statistics. He's actually very in love with them for some reason. He has a very methodic and cautious personality. We've been together for 4 happy years and married for 2 of those. We have very different yet complementing personalities. I love that about us. Before we met, Mark was in an 8-year-long relationship with his high school sweetheart. This one takes the award for most traumatizing event of his life. On the proposal day, he went to their house during his working hours to organize their date. His plan was to recreate the night they first met, which was at a school camp, so he'd decorate their backyard and pop the question. When Mark got home, he found his girlfriend in bed with one of his best friends. That day, he found out that very often, a certain guest came to their house during his working hours. Mark was completely oblivious about it, only took one romantic plan to get him out of his routine and find out about the affair. He was single for 2 years, having his hope in love completely lost until he met me. At the time, he started working with a close friend of mine, so we ran into each other frequently in bars, birthdays, and other parties. I was the one who asked him out. I fell for Mark because he has a nerdy personality that makes it clear that he's smart, but he was always shy about showing people how smart he actually is, which makes him even hotter. The outdoor activities we all knew he was into made me fall even harder. He wasn't just a statistics expert who doesn't see the daylight, he had hobbies and a social life. How perfect could he be? We started dating and I held back my feelings. It was clear Mark was hesitant about emotional connections after his ex. We followed his natural pace and eventually realized we were both head over heels with each other. He was scared about showing his feelings and being romantic, but the more I showed him how much I appreciated his gestures, the more he did it, and thank God he never stopped. One of our mutual interests is camping and nature in general. We both love doing it apart, so when we got together, it was the perfect match. One day we walked to the top of a hill to watch a meteor shower together. It was one of the most beautiful things I had ever witnessed. That night he proposed to me and I realized Mark was the one I definitely wanted to spend the rest of my life with. My marriage with Mark is a blessing in my life. He treats me better than I could ever expect or imagine. Every single day he finds a way to remind me I'm loved. I try my best to do the same to Mark, but he is amazingly better at it than me. He knows me in a way no one does. I could genuinely say Mark is my soulmate. Before we met, I expected to get married after my 30s, which seemed like the perfect age for it. The perfect moment to settle down after having great experiences in my 20s. I was 23 when we started dating. Since then, he is the only person in my life and is set to be the only for the rest of my life. I started feeling curious about things I could be experiencing. I love being with Mark in all the ways possible. I would never do anything behind his back to hurt him. Ever since we started dating, we promised to be honest with each other about absolutely everything. We only got through our toughest crisis because we were brutally honest to each other. That way we were able to rethink our actions and adjust them. We always made sure to maintain the safe space for honesty, especially if they are things a couple hides from one another. I sort of felt the need to share these feelings with my husband. One night we were having dinner at home and I asked if we could talk. I started with the subjects I studied and mentioned in the begging of this post. We followed a traditional model of relationship, were we traditional people. We were at the end of our 20s behaving in our marriage like our grandparents would want us to, something they didn't achieve themselves and just lied about it. Which finally brings me to one of the ongoing debates about dating culture, non-monogamy and open relationships. In this point of view, sex and love aren't codependent or related at all. Actually, they are related when you're with your partner, but not with other sexual partners, who you only get involved with for sexual purposes, or anything according to the rules you previously established with your partner. Couples tried, a lot failed, some succeeded and combined two lives together and even improved their relationship. People usually choose this type of relationship to adventure with others while still loving their partner. Is it consensual cheating? Is it cheating if it's consensual from all parties? Could it ruin a marriage? Could it save one? There were many questions I intended to share with Mark. I was hoping he'd be open to talk about it with me. His reaction was definitely unexpected. We talked about many different things which we knew our friends tried or stories we heard about other people. I asked if he felt curious to try any of those we discussed. He stopped for a second and started thinking like he had never thought about it before. I guess if I was single eventually I would have tried, but I prefer what we have in our life much more. He had a good answer. I said I also preferred what we had, but I sometimes felt curious about other things. He reacted naturally and asked me about what I was curious about, so I said I had thought about trying an open relationship. He frowned, didn't say anything, but there was a creeped out reaction on his face. I don't know if it can actually work out for us, but it's something some couples our age do. It seems interesting and fun. I kind of lost my speech once he started staring at me like I had suggested we committed a crime. He repeatedly asked me if I was serious. When I said it actually was, he just seemed shocked. This talk happened yesterday. I'm trying my best to remember exactly what we said, but it went kind of like this. Why would you want to open our relationship? Aren't you satisfied with me? Is there anything I can do better? He asked, a little upset. I reassured him there wasn't anything wrong with our relationship, that I loved him very much and this is just an adventure we could try. Look, we're still young, we'll spend the rest of our lives together comfortably, which is amazing because there's no one I'd rather spend the rest of my life with. While we wait for that stage, we can try new things we haven't done in our past relationship. I honestly felt what I was saying. Mark said being cheated is something he had tried in his last relationship and he didn't feel like doing it again. I guess this subject can trigger what he's been through, but in my point of view, it couldn't be the same thing. His ex-girlfriend lied to him, went behind his back, had an affair with someone very close to him, and while all of that happened, she never showed any discontent with how her relationship with Mark was. It's like she was fulfilling a sick fantasy of being with two people at the same time in secret. I had a small curiosity about what was out there. I loved being married, but I had the feeling I settled down early and lost experiences somehow important or just fun to have in your 20s. Finding out we, as a society, practice monogamy only as a social convention, because when we settled it is necessary for our lives. It was simply about how convenient it could be to the political context of the time. The concepts we have of marriage and monogamy are old. When they were settled, it was mainly used to make women keep it in their pants while their husbands were out in brothels. All of that made me realize I hadn't been studying human behavior to reproduce senseless social standards. Even so, if it turned out to be a big mess being with other people, I'd have no problem coming back to my traditional monogamous marriage with the man I love the most. I explained these things to Mark, but he didn't receive them very well. Amber, we made vows to each other. We decided to start a life with only the two of us. I understand all of your historical and psychological analysis, but an open relationship, it's too much and definitely not what we signed up for when we decided to do this. He finished talking, taking my hand and pointing at the golden ring on it. I asked if he ever felt attracted to someone else after we got married because I wouldn't be upset if he did. He looked at me, then he looked at the floor, then at my hands and said, "You know what?" He pulled the ring off my finger, then proceeded to take his ring off his finger. "Is this what you want?" He stood up while holding and showing me our rings. "If you think marriage and monogamy are so oppressive and stopping you from liberating yourself as a woman, fine. Got your message." He walked out of the kitchen, taking our rings with him. I followed him and tried to tell him that wasn't what I meant. Mark never acts this way. He never freaks out and starts yelling just to make a point. I wasn't used to seeing him like that. I'm not acting crazy, he answered after I asked him why he was acting crazy. You want an open relationship, you want to sleep with other people and come home to tell me about it? You want to enjoy your good years with strangers while your husband sits at home wondering when will it be enough for you? If that's your wish, then fine. He opened the bathroom's door, raised the toilet's lid, and when I realized what he was doing, I started yelling for him to stop. In 2 seconds, the rings were thrown in the water, and while I tried to stop him, he flushed it as if they were nothing. I stood there staring at Mark in shock. So you're not acting crazy, I see. He let go a deep breath while listening to what I said, then told me I had what I wished for. Now I could go live my life. What hurt me the most was him saying I still had time to find a jerk who would accept the crazy lifestyle I was suggesting. Maybe there's still time for you to propose to your ex. She'll pretend to only be with you. Lie and go behind your back, but at least you'll be living your perfect monogamy and being oblivious about it. I admit I only said that because he made me upset. Mark turned to me with a death look on his face and walked away until I heard our front door closing, in a little violent sound. It has been 2 days since our fight. Mark is staying with a friend and refuses to talk to me. I called, I texted, I emailed him, I called his mother and everything else I could do. I'm giving him the time he needs, but I have no idea if it was just the heat of the moment or if he'll actually want to get separated. I intend to apologize and tell him it was just a crazy idea. How do I make him forgive me? Do you think he'll still want to be with me? I have no idea what to do. Thanks for the attention, Reddit. I'll get back to you as soon as I have updates. Update. Hello, Reddit. I'm back with updates about the story of my husband flushing our wedding rings down the toilet after I suggested the idea we opened our relationship. Reading your comments and advices cleared my ideas. Some of them helped me to understand the situation better, so I'll share them with you. I should have considered this matter before marrying Mark. Many of you said that. I was very young when we started dating. If I wanted to have other experiences, I should have considered this wish before proceeding with the wedding plans. I admit it seems hurtful suggesting the idea of an open relationship when I agreed to marry him not long ago. I guess I was so silly with love at the time I couldn't actually think about other people. I read comments saying that maybe if I was desiring other people, there could be something I wasn't getting with Mark, which could be sexual or even emotional. I think getting used to married life involves accepting that your relationship will be completely different from the first months in the beginning. I was 23, in love and passionate about my boyfriend. When we decided to get married, those feelings returned and they lasted until our first year of marriage. Of course, I still loved Mark, but there weren't any butterflies in my stomach anymore, which is something normal. I always knew that. Some of you said I was scared of our relationship getting caught in a rut. Therefore, I proposed the most extreme solution, when there are other kinds of more comfortable adventures we could do together, other than an open relationship. I guess I got involved in the idea. You are probably right when saying the idea of an open relationship is better than reality. At the end of the day, I would be spending great and fun moments with strangers when I could be doing the same with my husband. I sent a few texts to Mark, which he took a whole week to reply to. I wanted to give him the space he needed. During our relationship, he always said that when he wants space, he actually needs it to figure things out, and he wished I respected his time. That's what I'm trying to do, but I really don't understand why he is so mad. I want him to see and understand that when I brought up the idea, I didn't mean I desperately needed an open relationship, or else I would do terrible things to myself. It's not having an open relationship or divorce in case he doesn't agree. I just wanted to discuss it with him, see his opinion, think and reflect if it would work out in our lives. If Mark doesn't want an open relationship, then we won't have one. This isn't a decision I can make alone. If he isn't willing to, then I don't want to sacrifice our loving relationship because of a stupid idea I had while reading about it. We are in the beginning of our relationship. We still have a lot to go through together. I've seen couples opening their relationship in their 50s or 60s. I guess it gets boring at that time of life. Mark and I are young. We don't even have kids, and we have a great future ahead of us. I guess the idea of a traditional marriage freaked me out, but now that I don't have my husband around, I realize how much I miss it. A week and a few days after our fight, he finally replied to my texts. He didn't give me much on how things were and what he was feeling, but at least there was a sign of contact showing he was alive. Here's what he said. Hey Amber, you probably know I've been staying with Matt. I still need time to think before we talk. I'm still upset about our fight and don't know exactly how to feel about it. I still need some time, please understand. Thank you for your patience. Bye, Amber. As I said, he didn't give me much, but I was glad to know he's alive. At this point, I could have showed up at his work, his parents' house, and even at Matt's, but I wanted to be respectful. I don't think I should be desperate about it because it's probably just a silly fight we're having and forgetting about it in 6 months, so I hope. Last Friday night, I heard our front door getting unlocked. Mark was home. I was in the living room standing in shock. He seemed surprised when he noticed me there, even though we lived there together. He took a deep breath seeing me and said he needed to get some clothes, but he'd be out soon. I tried talking to him while he took his clothes out of the closet and put them, very well folded and organized, in his bag. He was clearly trying to get it over with so that he could leave as soon as possible. Mark answered all my questions vaguely every time he looked at me. He turned his face around as if it was something he shouldn't be watching. That felt horrible. My own husband didn't want to look at me. I wanted to break down in tears in front of him, but I needed to be strong. He got everything he needed and almost left running to his car. When he crossed the living room, I asked if he was ever coming back. He just answered, "I'll try." Update. Hello again. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and a lot of things have happened. I'll break it down to you, and remember, opinions are appreciated. Maybe one thing that can come out off this mess is a research theme about romantic and sexual behavior, but Mark definitely wouldn't agree on being the subject of study. A few days after Mark showed up at home, I got a call from Matt's girlfriend, the friend Mark has been staying with. She mentioned they went out together with some other friends. When they asked him where I was, he simply explained out fight to them word by word. The subjects I mentioned, the infamous open relationship, the questions I made him, the moment he flushed our wedding rings, and even what I said to him about his ex. He talked about absolutely everything. He outed us to all of his friends. She even said it didn't sound like Mark at all, which I agreed with because he was always discreet about our business. I guess for some reason he didn't have anything to hide anymore. I felt betrayed, and he was out there talking about me as if I had betrayed him, when I simply suggested something that didn't even happen. I swear to God, hearing open relationship being said gives me a headache. If I knew it would be this psychological hell, I would have never even mentioned it. She also said he doesn't know if he wants to get divorced, but according to his words, he can't stand to look at me anymore. You can't even imagine how delightful it was to hear that. After she hung up, I immediately picked up my phone and texted him. I don't understand what is happening to you. You never acted like this. Why can't you just talk to me about what you're feeling instead of spreading our business to all of your friends? I don't care about your space anymore if you don't come home today and talk about it with me. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow so we can start our divorce. You're my husband. You have to talk to me and can't just walk away when I don't act the way you expect me to. I sent it. He saw it immediately, but he never showed up. I waited up all night crying. I even expected him the next day. Mark didn't show up then and also the rest of the week. He didn't even reply to my text. I waited days for him, but he never showed up. So I had to do what I threatened to, but didn't actually think I'd have to use it. The divorce papers are getting here any day now, and guess what? No news from Mark. I don't think I had ever felt a greater pain, especially knowing he's doing it on purpose. He could come here, call me a bitch, and say he'd rather die than still be married to me. Instead, he decided to say nothing and abandon me. He broke my heart, but only because I broke his, so I don't know exactly what to feel. Be careful with what you talk about with your significant other. I guess you should learn from my mistake and not suggest things they might be extremely triggered by. I didn't know he was going to react this way. Learned something new about him, and we're just about to get a divorce. How ironic. Thanks for following my story, Reddit. Things didn't turn out well, but I guess you are used to that.
Need advice? Our divorce lawyer is someone I have a past with. Now I'm in big trouble. Hey guys, it's my first time here on Reddit, and I'm here because I want to share a story with everyone. I also need help, so if you would please read this, I thank you, and I'll want your advice at the end of it. My name is Valerie, and I am 29 years old. I had an affair with my divorce lawyer. I know it's crazy to believe, but every time I think about it, I tell myself it's real. I am soon to be divorced, and my husband and I had planned to fix our relationship. Now, I know we can no longer fix it anymore. My husband's name is Greg, and he's 32 years old. I met Greg when I was in high school, and I was 17 years old then. I don't know why, but we hit it off immediately once we met. Greg was a caring guy, and I didn't see any flaws in him because he felt perfect to me. We dated throughout high school, but his family weren't doing okay financially. He tried getting jobs, but that didn't help much either. I told him I can help since I came from an above-average family and we were okay financially. He told me he didn't want help from his girlfriend, but he was really grateful. By the time we finished high school, I remember Greg was no longer cheerful since he was worrying about what to do next and how to help his family. I kept asking him why he didn't want my help, and he told me he wasn't comfortable. He said he was the one that's supposed to take care of me, not the other way round. I tried telling him I didn't care about the money issue, but I guess it was just a man thing. At one point, I couldn't meet up with him again, and we didn't see each other most of the time. I hated the fact that his pride was trying to come in between our relationship. I talked to him about it again, and he told me an uncle of his who was overseas called him to come work for me. I wanted to beg him to stay, but I knew that would be extremely selfish of me. He gave me one last kiss and told me to wait for him. He also said he'd understand if I wanted to find someone else, and he didn't want to tie me down. I told him I was going to wait for him no matter what it took. Greg also said he would be keeping in contact with me. 3 years passed, and I was 20 years old by then. Greg had been keeping in contact with me as promised. Throughout the years that we were far apart, he kept informing me about how things were going for him. He told me about the work. I can't disclose it here, sorry. But it was bringing a lot of money for his family. I was happy to hear, even though I wasn't happy about the job. I told Greg I missed him, and he said he missed me too. I asked Greg about when he planned on coming back, and he told me very soon. I loved Greg with all my heart, but my feelings kept fluctuating because he was far away. There was a time I dated a guy during the 3 years that had passed to fill that numb feeling I had, and I had slept with the guy then. I felt guilty, and it felt like I was cheating on Greg. I didn't tell Greg about it because I tried to keep the memory at the back of my mind. I didn't know that the memory would come back to haunt me. Another year passed, and I turned 21. By then, I had already moved out of my parents' house and rented my own place with the help of my parents. I didn't want to depend on my parents forever, so I decided to find a job. I didn't go to college because I didn't see the use. I was able to get a job as a teacher in a school through the connection of my parents. I think the other teachers in the school didn't like me because of that, but it wasn't like I cared. The pay was okay, and I told Greg all about my own place and everything that had happened. Greg asked me where I stayed in the US, and I told him. I thought he was just asking for no reason, but one day, I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door, and it was Greg standing on my front doorstep. I was shocked to see him there, and my emotions were all tangled up. I didn't know what to feel, and all I knew was that my love for him had reduced. I thought it was maybe because it had been 4 years since I'd met him, and the love would rekindle for him. I had to pretend like I still loved him, and I jumped on him, hugging him tight. We caught up on a lot of things, and he told me more things. He told me that he was going to open his business firm. I won't be disclosing the name. He bought an apartment for the two of us to live in. He also said that he would open a boutique for me, and I was happy about that. Along the way, everything followed as planned, and it was okay for us. Yet, I didn't feel that full love for him. By the time I turned 23, we went on one of our dates that day to celebrate my birthday. I was shocked when he got down on one knee and proposed. I was going to say no because I wasn't sure or ready, but he looked so happy, and I didn't want to break his heart by telling him no. I know what everyone's thinking, and I know what I did was wrong, but I can't go back to the past to change that. We got married by the time I was 24, and he made it a big wedding. He invited all our family members and friends. I didn't want a big party, but he was so excited throughout as we were planning it. We got married, and everything worked out well. I gave birth to a baby boy, and we named him after his grandfather, Jonah. Our family came around, and we celebrated. My boutique business was booming, and I had a lot of customers. I think things started to change when he stopped coming home early. He told me his job was getting stressful and taking most of his time. I complained to him about it, but Greg kept saying I should give him more time and he'd make it up to me. My love for him kept fading, and I could see the distance set in. Jonah was growing old, and he turned 2 years, and I was 27 years then. The only time Jonah could see Greg was on weekends, and I hated that. I tried complaining, but he asked for more time. Eventually, he became free, but that didn't make my feelings for him better. He usually told me, "I love you," but it has been long since I heard those words from him. I knew he was also feeling that distance and losing his feelings for me. Jonah is 4 years old now, and he's very smart. It pained me to see him walking around not knowing he had parents who didn't love each other that much. I stopped going to my boutique at one point because I got some workers to help me out there. I talked to Greg and told him we had to get a divorce because I couldn't force myself to love him. I asked him if he was feeling the same way, and he said he was. He wanted us to fix it, and he tried, but it was to no avail, and the feelings didn't rekindle. Yet he kept on trying. One day he told me we were going to get a divorce, and I won't lie, but I felt a little bit happy. I was away from the loveless marriage, which was my fault, in the same place. Greg told me that he was going to get a divorce lawyer, and he was true with his words. But I regret thinking this. The next day came, and it was 10 a.m. in the morning when the doorbell rang and I went to answer it. The shock on my face was wide because I was surprised to see the person in front. It was the man I had something with during the past. He was the one I didn't tell Greg about. I told him to come in, and I tried to compose myself to act like I didn't know him. What bothered me was the way my heart started beating fast, but not from fear, but excitement. I didn't know what to feel, but it was the same as the first time I met Greg. The divorce lawyer introduced himself as Lucas, and my husband shook his hand. I knew his name, but I acted like I didn't know him. I couldn't have the strength to tell my husband about it, and I hope Lucas said nothing about it. He sat down, and he said nothing for a few seconds. My husband stood up to receive a call before anything started, and Lucas and I stared at ourselves. I didn't know what to say to him, and I'm pretty sure he didn't know either. I was about to say something to him, but my husband came back. The meeting started, and I watched as Lucas and Greg discussed a lot of things. Greg told him about the whole relationship issue we had, and that we wanted a divorce because we were falling out of love, and I felt guilty. We decided on the things I would be getting after the divorce would be finalized, and how we would fix child custody on Jonah. Lucas said he understood, and he needed 2 days to put together documents and review them before he was back. Throughout the conversation, I felt his eyes stealing glances at me. Lucas gave Greg his number, and he gave me too. The whole thing was weird because I didn't have his number anymore since I deleted it long ago. We thanked him, and he left. After that happened, I received a weird text that night with just a hey, and I already knew who it was. I texted him back, and that was how I started talking to him. That night, he said he had a lot of questions to ask me, and he would love to meet up with me the next day. I was hesitant at first, but I couldn't turn him down since I was the one that cut contact with him with no explanations, and he saw me a year later, married to someone. I agreed to meet him, and I was still contemplating whether I should tell my husband the truth, but I wasn't ready. Before I went to sleep, my husband told me again that he really wanted to make us work, and he was sorry for everything he did and how he had been acting. I also apologized to him, but just at random, not for a particular thing. I couldn't tell him that I was the one that began to fall out of love in the first place ever since he traveled then. The next day arrived faster than I had expected, and I already hated the day. Greg pecked me on my cheeks before leaving, and I smiled at him. I had to drop Jonah off at the school before I went to the bathroom to clean up and get ready to meet with Lucas. The problem was that I knew I wanted to dress up for him, and I felt silly about that. I put on my casual clothes and a light makeup. I felt crazy because why was I putting on makeup to meet up with an ex? Anyways, I had contacted him, and he told me to meet up with him at a restaurant. I went there, and once I spotted him, he waved at him. I wore my glasses because I hoped none of my husband's friends would recognize me. We were both speechless after I sat down, and I wished he would say something first to break the silence. My wish came through, and he started by asking him why I broke it off then and everything we had. I told him the truth about Greg and the whole story about us, and he listened. By the time I was done, he sighed and he said he understood everything. He said he was upset with me and he felt happy to see me, and I smiled at him. The next thing he said after was shocking. He told me he still wanted something with me, but I just frowned. He did know I was married, but even though I was going through a divorce, I couldn't believe he was going to say something like that. Although a part of me actually wanted to be with him and let him feel me, and I was ashamed of that thought. I knew I was supposed to feel annoyed by what he said, but the thing that annoyed me was that I didn't. I didn't say anything, and I got lost in thoughts, not until he called my name to snap me out of it. He apologized for saying something so absurd, but I brushed it off and told him it was okay. Lucas asked me if my husband knew about us and what we had in the past, but I told him I couldn't tell him, so he just nodded in an understanding manner. He asked me if we could be just friends because he missed what we had and the way we vibed with each other. I didn't think he had any second thoughts about it, but I should have known better. I didn't even think before I said yes to us being friends again. I went home that day with a smile on my face, not knowing that things were going to take a turn for the worse. Lucas came over the next day, and we still acted like we didn't know ourselves before now. He brought some documents he had printed out and compiled based on the division of the assets. I didn't see the use in getting anything from Greg, but Greg insisted. He was going to leave me with the house, and the boutique was in my name, so it didn't matter. I also read through some documents, and it mentioned that Greg wanted to leave me with a huge amount of cash. I protested, saying I didn't need something like that, but I felt like it was an excuse to just see Lucas again. Lucas said he would come over again in some days with the finalized papers which Greg and I will have to sign. I was sad but happy at the same time, and I don't know if that makes sense. Lucas kept contacting me at night, and we texted talking about random things. I had taken Jonah to school that day and got back home. I was bored and didn't know what to do. It was like Lucas read my mind from anywhere he was, and I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door to see Lucas standing in my front with his usual suit and the bag he carried. I wasn't expecting him, so it was awkward. He explained that he called Greg and informed him that he was coming, but Greg said he was at work, but he should show me the documents so I could agree on them. I told Lucas to come in, and he sat down. I could feel his scent lingering in the air when it passed, and it made me feel some kind of way. He asked when Greg would be back, but I didn't think he had a motive, so I told him in the evening, and we started talking about the documents. He told me to come sit beside him to look at the documents clearer, and it was dumb, I know. I listened to him, and I felt his hands brush past my thighs. He leaned in for a kiss, and I accepted it. It felt different than Greg's own. I don't know how it happened, but we were both on the bed, staring at the ceiling with the sheets over us. The guilt came back to me, and it was due to the fact that I had just slept with my ex, who was also our divorce lawyer. I knew it also meant that I just cheated on my husband because the divorce had not been finalized. Lucas turned his head to face me and smiled at me. He asked me if I didn't enjoy what we just did, and I lied to him that I didn't. It was one of the best things I'd ever felt before. He asked me if I didn't miss this because he knew I was lying. I told him to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. I had mixed feelings, but with what happened, a part of me knew I wanted to be with Greg, and I told Lucas that. I told him we should forget what had happened between us in the past and right now. I also told Lucas that if my marriage didn't work out, I wanted to get divorced happily and not have anything to do with him. Me sleeping with him made me sure that I felt nothing for him. I don't know what triggered him, but he got up and started dressing up. It was clear that he was angry at me, but I didn't do what I said wrong. He told me he wished I had changed my mind and that I was going to regret not changing my mind. He packed his things and told me he was going to come back and he would inform Greg. I didn't know what to say, and I kept quiet. The remaining days went smoothly, and I noticed that Greg was changing. He was trying to be there when I needed it, and we were discussing our feelings more. I was beginning to change my mind on the divorce because I wanted to make this marriage work. The guilt of sleeping with Lucas was still there, and I tried pushing it to the back of my mind. Greg and I didn't bother contacting Lucas again for him to come with any papers. 1 week had passed since I had an affair with Lucas. Greg and I were enjoying our time together in the living room. He had taken time off from work to spend it with me. The doorbell rang, and he went to check who it was. It took some time for him to get back, so I went to check on him. I saw Lucas standing at the door with a strong look on his face. I don't know what he told Greg, but Greg told him to come in and sit down. He also told me to sit. Greg told Lucas that he was planning on canceling the divorce, but with what he heard from him, he wanted to confirm it from me, or divorce was going to happen as soon as possible. I was scared because I knew something had happened at the door, and I'll never know what it was. Greg asked me if it was true that I'd slept with Lucas. I denied it at first because there was no proof and it was just claims. Everything changed when Lucas played a voice record and I heard my voice. It was when I had just slept with him and the conversation we had. I know I messed up big time. I tried denying, but there was no use, so I told him it was true. I also said it was during our divorce, but I know I still cheated on him. I tried apologizing, but he didn't listen. I looked at Lucas angrily, but he had a tiny smirk on his face. He was happy about all this happening, and I felt like hitting his face. I knew it wasn't his fault, but mine. Lucas said he was going to leave and told Greg to contact him about the divorce if he wanted to change anything. Greg just sat looking at me dumbstruck. I think he was thinking about everything that happened because he had a sad look on his face. I told him I still wanted him, and what happened was a silly mistake, but he didn't listen. I also told him about my past with Lucas and how I'd slept with him when Greg was overseas. That made him more infuriated and he left the house. It happened 2 days ago and I wasn't able to contact him because I think he blocked me. I'm all alone with Jonah in the house, but I'm worried that I'll lose Jonah since Lucas and Greg were plotting something regarding the divorce. I don't know what to do because it feels like I'll lose everything. How do I make things better? Please help me. Asterisk, asterisk. Comments. Asterisk. 1. Asterisk, asterisk, you/Reddit user. 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Okay, you messed up big time, Valerie. What were you thinking? The moment things went wrong was when you didn't tell Greg about Lucas, and then you even agreed to meet up with him. Also, what kind of wife agrees to be friends with her? You knew what it was going to come to. You should give up because I don't think he will take you back. 2. Asterisk, asterisk, you/Reddit user 2. Asterisk, asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk, you/Reddit user 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Can you stop bashing the poor lady? She made silly mistakes and she came here for advice. Valerie, your marriage sounds great even if you were unsure of the love you had for Greg. You still tried to make it work when you felt nothing, and I feel like that's a good thing you did. If Greg ends the marriage, you should find someone else who deserves you. Don't cry over spilled milk. 3. Asterisk, asterisk, you/Reddit user 3. Asterisk, asterisk. When you mean you're worried you'll lose everything, do you mean the house and the boutique? I thought you were rich, so you shouldn't worry about that, haha. If you do want to fix things, you should apologize to him once he gets home, and maybe his family members if they'll listen to you. But if not, there's nothing you can do. Update. Okay, well, a lot of things have happened since I made that post. Greg came back 2 days after with Lucas. I was scared, but I listened to the advice I read in the comments. I apologized to Greg so many times, but he still didn't listen. Lucas showed me the divorce papers, and I was shocked. I wasn't going to get any money or even the house. It also wrote that he'll be taking custody of Jonah, but I argued on that. I can't lose everything. In one day, so he agreed. I protested about lots of things on the divorce paper, but I knew I deserved it. I signed the paper because Greg said he didn't want to see my face anymore and I should leave quickly. I went to my parents' house and told them all that happened. They said they were ashamed of me, and that hurt to hear. I also contacted Greg's family, but they said they don't want to talk to me. I left Jonah with Greg because he said he deserved to see him more than I did, and I know he was right. I don't deserve anything. He left me with the boutique because it was already on my name, but I think Greg paid them to leave because they all quit some days later and said they couldn't work for me anymore. This happened because I wasn't content with my marriage and I didn't talk about my true feelings with him. If you're married out there and not happy, talk to your husband about it and discuss it. Thank you for the advice and for reading this.